Today's episode of Variant is brought to you by Full Sail University.
Today on Variant, I talked to the writer of Injustice, Brian Buccellato. Welcome to Variant. We love comics more than I really want some Surge. I'm your host, Arris. Speaking of Surge, I know they re-released it a few months back, but I still haven't had any. I know. It's pretty sad. Recently I had the chance to sit down with Brian Buccellato. He's written/writing tons of amazing comics, like Injustice, Detective Comics, his creator-owned title, Sons of the Devil, and he's one of the co-writers that helped launch the New 52 Flash title. He also colored said Flash title. So needless to say, he's written some awesome stuff, but enough talking about him. Let's talk to him. You've done lots of stuff in the world of comics, but how did you get into comics?
Let's see. Well, my sort of route into comics was through my brother. Okay. We both went to the High School of Art and Design in New York, and when he was a junior, he got an internship at Marvel. So this was in the 80s.
Right.
And so that was kind of his foot in the door in comics. You know, we both loved comics and wanted to work in comics. He ended up being an editor, and then editors back then would like color comic books to like supplement their income. Right. And so he became a colorist and made a lot of money and was like, wow, this is better than being an editor. So he moved out to LA, was working as a colorist, and in the meantime I had gone to college and I went to NYU, owed them a whole bunch of money. And so they were like, yo, don't come back until you pay off what you owe. So I was like, okay, I got half a degree, don't know what I'm doing. So my brother was like, why don't you come out to LA and I'll teach you how to color. And so that was how I got into comics.
That's awesome. So you started as a colorist, right? Because
right.
Obviously we know you colored a lot of your stuff. You colored The Flash and New 52 and a bunch of other stuff. Right. But how did that lead into the writing?
Well, okay, so I come out to LA in the mid-90s, and like everyone else who comes out to LA, for some reason you're like, I'm going to be an actor. So like I took acting classes, and then I went out and I did auditions, and I did enough like little indie stuff to realize that I didn't want to be in front of the camera. I wanted to be behind the camera. So I just started writing. And I took some extension classes, and I read every book on screenwriting that I could. Right. And I wrote a lot of really bad screenplays, and I put in the hours, and I started sucking less and less. Right. In the meantime, I met Tim Story, who is a director who did Barbershop, Fantastic Four. He'd always let me work on his stuff, and at some point, sort of my skills met my passion, and I was able to do some ghostwriting for him. I worked on some of his films, writing, and so I started building sort of a reputation, at least among the people who knew me as a writer. And so when the New 52 happened, Francis is a really good friend of mine, and we've worked together since Top Cow days. Oh, nice. We had a relationship, as friends and as collaborators. I colored him for a long time, and so Francis was offered the gig to write and draw Flash for the New 52. Right. And so he's a storyteller, but never had any formal experience writing. So he was like, "You want to write it with me?" And that just sort of blew the doors open in terms of my career. And I'm really proud of the stuff that we did on Flash.
Speaking of Flash, you kind of already said it already, but the New 52 is basically, or is, DC's reboot, right? They kept some continuity, but it's for a whole new generation. All the characters revamped, and like I just said, they kept some of the stuff. But it's got to feel, you're taking over a founding member of the Justice League. There's only the Justice League and the Avengers, the two biggest superhero teams in the world, right?
Yeah.
So it's like I'm co-writing Flash. What's that pressure like, taking on a character that's so iconic and will stand the test of time for years and years to come?
You know what? I thought it was in some ways scary, but it was a fun challenge. I say this all the time in interviews. I think writing is creative problem solving. Right. You find out what the parameters are of the story. So when you work for Marvel or DC, you're using pre-existing characters who have a backstory, have relationships. Mm-hmm. All that stuff is already there. And then on the other side, you have editorial, and you have the direction that the comic company is moving, and so you have to sort of navigate the past with the goals of the company and find a way to tell the story that you want to tell within the context of those things. So that's why it's creative problem solving. So if you have to write a story about X character in Y place, with a monkey and a broom and this and that, you just write find the best damn way to tell that story. So right. That's just what we did. And we tried to never make a change with Barry that was arbitrary. We always had what we felt was a reason. And sometimes the reason is, people have seen that old version so many times that we just don't want to rehash the same thing. Right. But we always want to respect, the character and the relationships that he had. And one thing that we try to do was make all the villains and stuff more related to Barry, connecting him to the Speed Force, like Gorilla Grodd and stuff like that. So, that was how we interpreted, a new generation of Barry Allen.
Two things stand out to me when you said that, talking about the villains and stuff. Like, you worked with the Rogues, which you changed them up a little bit for the New 52. So how did just tweak them a little bit? How did that? You're just like, I just want to make this new, or you had a cool idea. You're like, this will be cool.
That was actually a mandate. They wanted to integrate powers into the characters. They felt that Flash. I don't know if this has ever even been said before, but from up high, they thought that it'd be a great idea to make them have powers because like functionally, it was always a tough sell that guys with guns who could be disarmed very easily, who got wands and guns, how could they, be a challenge to the Flash?
Right.
So, we figured out a way that it made sense to us. But we started out with them not having powers.
Right.
Like, we didn't want to like reimagine them as they've always had powers. They're metahumans. We created a scenario where they're going through the same thing. They're like, hey, we can't hang with Flash with these guns, and so we created that whole scenario where they try to get their powers.
Right.
And of course, it has sort of sort of mixed, sometimes disastrous results. Heatwave got all burned, and Golden Glider, she was intangible. So we tried to find creative story ways to make it interesting based on what sort of our mandate was, and I don't mean mandate in a negative way. You know what I mean? Like sometimes, like change is sometimes good.
For sure.
I think in comic books, people tend to get really mad at change, but all those old comics exist. You can always read those old comics. Like why do I want to read another story about the rebirth of Phoenix or the death of Phoenix?
Right.
Like, and they already have my favorite version of that. Why not something new?
Yeah. Well, I was just gonna say, like, changing it makes total sense because the Flash is arguably, a lot of people say, he's even stronger than Superman in the sense where, like, with the Speed Force, he could go back in time and basically kill Superman when he was a baby. End of story, you know what I mean? Or just multiple powers like that. Like, if you wanted to, he could. Going to another villain, you also did you and Francis did your own take on Reverse Flash, which is really cool. So tell us a little bit about that.
Again, that was sort of a mandate that they really wanted to see what our version of Reverse Flash was. Like, I don't think we were like, let's do Reverse Flash. It was like, hey, why don't you guys, you've done the Rogues and you've done this, you've done Grodd, why not do Reverse Flash? And so for us, it was like, well, that's an interesting challenge because we just had a whole, the universe was reset because of Reverse Flash.
Yeah.
So are we going to tell the same story, Thawne and all that kind of stuff when it was just done a couple of years earlier? So we decided, well, we don't want to do that. That's absolutely rehashing, and then it opens up a whole can of worms of, how does that affect Flashpoint and New 52, and that we weren't interested in that, So we decided to do a take of Reverse Flash that was tied to Barry Allen, obviously through the West family,
right? Which was very well done.
Well, thank you. So so we basically took an opportunity where we had established Daniel West in Zero. With an eye towards doing that, and so we planted that seed early, and then we're able to sort of build on that. You're
not ready Flash anymore, but do you think the new Flash series right now is huge? Have you seen anything that kind of like they took from you and Francis's run? You're like, hey, wasn't that something I did in those several issues?
I mean, honestly, I've only seen about 5 or 6 episodes.
Oh, okay.
Because, only so many hours in a day.
No, it's true. It's very true.
So I don't know if they took anything or were inspired by our stuff. I had a writer in San Diego who's on the Flash show. He say that they all read all of our stuff, and they really
awesome.
They really liked it, and it was pretty cool. When Grant Gustin was cast, he messaged me on Twitter or something, and we had a full conversation about it. It was pretty cool. I thought he didn't have to do that, but it was really nice that he
Dude,
that he reached
awesome.
out like that. Yeah,
no, for sure. Yeah, he's respecting the writer of the character he's playing. Because without the comics, there would be no movies, TV shows. It's the source material.
Yep, for sure. I mean, and it's not mine. I mean, dude's way older than me.
Barry
Allen.
You were just lucky enough to take the reins for a little bit.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
But switching up a little bit, going from the Flash into actually the creator-owned world.
Okay, well, I'll take that. The DC.
and rep the Image shirt.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
You're doing Sons of the Devil. It's 4 issues in. It's your creator-owned series. And I'll let you tell the people what it's about. I'm caught up and I love it.
It's tough to give the pitch without spoiling. That's the real
true.
problem with pitching it because really what it is, and I guess 4 issues in we kind of can see it manifesting. There was a cult in the late '80s, and its leader David Daly he makes a deal with the devil to sacrifice his flock for some kind of demonic power. The night the big sacrifice is going to go down, one of the mothers of these 9 children that he fathered saves the babies, kidnaps them, takes them out of the cult. Fast forward 25 years later, the massacre happened. He couldn't fulfill his contract because the babies were gone. He returns 25 years later and he's hunting them down because he wants to finish what he started. That's the plotty part of it. The story is really about one of the children who's grown up. He's 25 years old. His name is Travis.
Right.
Yeah, he has the same defect in his eye. He's got a red eye. So does his father. And so because of that, certain people think he's this chosen one.
Right.
And then, of course, all this stuff starts pervading and like seeping into his life, like all this history. And
Right.
He's going to find out, where he came from and, what the designs are that are set upon him. And he's going to have to deal with that. So he's going to have to deal with, the devil coming at him, basically.
What I love about it is that you can really tell that, especially that you just told me now, screenplay writer and stuff like that. Like all the influences, to me, like it's like very kind of True Detective-y, maybe Red State from Kevin Smith, just because it's got that cult vibe going on. But the story is about, obviously, everything you just said, but I love the arcs for each character. Like it's very character-driven, and everyone's got their own thing going on because, you got Travis, abandonment issues, dealing with that. You got his girlfriend, who there's something going on with her that I don't want to say. And I just really like all the arcs and different side stories, especially the way you're writing it right now. You kind of give us a flashback in the beginning, right? Like what happened in 1989. We'll have like 3 or 4 pages of that, then it'll go to present. But we're slowly seeing through those flashbacks, you're like, oh, that's what's happening. And, we don't know, we know kind of, but we we don't know what's really happening yet as of issue 4.
You're almost seeing like snapshots or I guess, vines of what happened in the past. And at some point it's going to be, the picture's going to be clear. Like an awful lot of stuff happened in the past, and David Daly has a story that hopefully I'll get to tell the whole story where he came from, why he feels the way he feels, and why he hears the devil in his head, and all that kind of stuff. But they all have stories. Henry from the past, he returns in issue 4. A lot of these characters you'll see where they were 25 years ago, and then they come back. Issue 5, another character returns from the past.
Oh.
Yeah, and so that
now I'm curious.
comes out then at the end of the month, and then so that'd be the first arc, and then 2 months after that, November, the trade comes out, and we'll go on hiatus because Tony Infante, who we haven't mentioned yet, who is an amazing artist.
Right. Yes, I was going to say the art is stunning in this comic.
I always feel bad that I spend all this time talking about story, and it's like it wouldn't really be a story without his art because he brings all the characters to life.
No, it's great.
He's amazing, and he does all of the art. He does the coloring. Like I don't.
Oh wow.
The art. Because of that, it takes him longer to do a book than it does the average artist because he's penciling, inking, and coloring the art. So we're going to go on hiatus and come back in March. So issue 6 will come back in March, and then we'll be monthly for the second arc.
Everyone, I'm not just saying this as I'm talking to Brian. I really love this comic, and if you like horror or mystery, you need to pick this up and make sure this book has some longevity to it. So you're doing Injustice right now, which is basically, between the 5-year gap of Injustice, Gods Among Us. You came in midway through year 3. Like how, it had already been very popular at the time when you took over. How was, again, it feels like pressure is like, oh, I got to keep this going. I can't let it die out because people are going to be like, I'm the one responsible for making this series crap. So
yeah, I mean, you're not going to please everybody, But I think that it was easier for me because he had sort of a macro plan for year 3. It was the year of magic, so I knew he had set all these things up, and it was just up to me to sort of flesh them out and then pay them off, And so it was kind of an easy transition because of that, So I'd already done almost half a year of year 3, so when it came time to year 4, I was able to sort of take it in my own direction, and I'd had all the experience of having done the other stuff.
Right.
So that I was like, okay, now I know where everybody is. All the pieces are here, there, and everywhere, and I'm going to go in this direction. And so for me, it was, to do the year of the gods. I was like, let's put the gods and Gods Among Us. And so, I brought in the Greek gods because I thought it was interesting to me. I had set up something in year 3 with Hippolyta and Hera. And I thought, well, that's a good opportunity to sort of snowball into something much bigger. And so here's where we are now in year 4, where Zeus and the gods are not being nice.
Well, what's your favorite character to write out of the bunch? Because they're basically different versions of the DC proper. So who's the most fun for you to write?
I mean, it's a cop out to say so, but obviously Harley's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Because she's such a wild card. Like she can be extremely violent. She can be almost murderous. on one level, but she can also be like insanely sort of endearing and funny and cute. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, so like she's got a strange dichotomy that makes her really fun to write. The way to do that normally is through relationships. So Tom had built up this whole thing with with Green Arrow and Canary. And he also did, I think, like Lobo and
Right.
and Harley. So what I did in year 4 is I decided to have her have a crush on Shazam. And so that it took the form it took. It's a strange little crush. She doesn't have a crush on Billy Batson because he's a little kid, but
and that would be weird.
Yeah, totally weird. But she totally digs Shazam. So that was really fun.
And that'll wrap up our conversation, but I want to say thank you to Brian for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to me. Also, be sure to check out all of his work, like some of the stuff we talked about today, like his New 52 Flash work, his work on Injustice, which everyone is loving right now, his Detective Comics stuff, and of course his creator-owned titled for Image, Sons of the Devil. It is absolutely amazing. If you like horror mystery type stuff, pick this up. You will not regret it. And I'm not just saying that because I had Brian on the show. It's just really good writing and the art is fantastic. And be sure to follow Brian on all the social medias like Twitter, Facebook, and so on. I'll put the links for all that stuff in the description below. If you're watching this show, chances are you're into creating your own art, but have you considered enhancing your skills and making a career in 3D animation? Full Sail's computer animation program was designed to prepare you for a career in this exciting field by expanding your abilities as an artist and learning the latest tools, applications, and design theory used to create 3D content for different media. You'll not only be able to take your art in new directions, but also put your skills to work realizing and sometimes even improving the creative visions of others. On-campus students have access to Full Sail's motion capture studio. In this facility, you'll learn how to run a professional motion capture session as you direct the action of performers wearing a sensor-monitored bodysuit and use this data to create even more lifelike movements in your digital characters. All Full Sail students receive a laptop preloaded with industry software at a deep institutional discount. To learn more about this and all of Full Sail's programs and fields related to the entertainment and media industry, including art and design, filmmaking, recording arts, entertainment business, and many more, visit fullsail.edu/variant. First up for Wednesday, September 16th, we have Captain America White Issue 1. From his reawakening in present day to his days on the battlefield during World War II, follow Captain America as he recalls a special mission. Here we have Harley Quinn Issue 20. Harley became an overnight entertainment sensation, but will the industry survive Harley's 15 minutes of fame? And finally, we have Injustice Gods Among Us Year 4 Issue 10. Harley Quinn breaks out of her prison on Olympus and tells Wonder Woman where her mother is being held and reveals the real manipulator behind the scenes. And that'll wrap up today's episode of Variant, but be sure to like our Variant Facebook page to keep up with the show and all things comic related. You can also follow Variant on Twitter at Variant Comics or me on Twitter at Arris_Quinones. And if you like what you see, be sure to subscribe to our channel. But I'll see you guys next week where I talk about all things comics.
It was scary at first, and honestly, if you look back at our beginning run on Flash, we wrote about Barry Allen being overwhelmed because we were kind of overwhelmed by the responsibility.
Right.
Like we had never done written comics, and had never, had to take a character that was so iconic that was almost 75 years old,
Right.
and then bring him to a whole new sort of universe. So it was definitely something we took very seriously, and we did feel overwhelmed, but in the end, I think we sort of rose to the occasion, and I'm really proud of the stuff that we did on Flash.